Well, it has been a hot minute since I have filmed an episode. Several reasons for that. I changed jobs. If the airplane looks the same as it did last time, it's not quite true. There was a couple setbacks in my oil tank, which I think I'm beyond. If you came to this episode to see that first engine run, this isn't it. Come back next time. This is episode 38. So a few days after posting my last episode, I had accepted a position to fly a PC-12 air ambulance out of Eastern Washington. So that last part of August went to Indoc in Denver, came back for a week, went to Alaska, came back, went to flight safety for a week, and then came back to do my initial operating experience in the PC-12. It's been a cool job. Flying legal IFR is pretty cool. Anyway, enough of that. Let's take a tour of what I have managed to accomplish. First up, I finished the installation of the brake lines all the way to the calipers. At one point when I was back in Bethel, I looked at the 207s that we fly, and they had the calipers in this exact position, but they had the brake lines coming off the bottom, off the top, and the brake bleeder on the bottom, just like you see right here. I talked to the mechanics, and they said it was going to work either way because I'm going to use a power bleeder anyway. But I decided, in the interest of lessening the likelihood that I'm going to snag these brake lines on something, I flipped them around the same way as the 207. What else did I get done? I got the oil pressure sensor installed. This is at M10x1. There's two different leads that come off of here. One goes to the engine information system that shows the gauge readout, and the other one is just an alarm if it drops below 8 psi. And this is an engine ground wire, which just comes from one of the cylinder heads. I just decided to start the flow of the engine wire installation from here, work my way towards the firewall. The main thing that I spent too much time on was my oil tank installation. These end plates are the ones I had made by Send Cut Send, the aluminum tubing, all the rest of the hardware except for the AN hardware is from McMaster Carr. There's a rubber sheet insulating the aluminum tank from all the metal parts, so it only touches rubber. This is one of the other parts I had Send Cut Send make, and the nylon blocks I made at home. The issue, I got lines everywhere, but this one here bothered me. This is the main crankcase drain, which comes from, you can see the red cap there. The intention was that it's going to come through this saddle and then down, but you can see that it doesn't quite line up, so now I have to remove this tank, package it up, and I'm going to ship it to Brett, my engine importer. He's going to cut this off and orient it so it points straight up. This is the oil temperature sender unit. It's just in here loose right now, which is meant to ground to the tank, but remember the tank is only touching rubber, so there is no ground. And then this is a mystery thing I had to ask people on Facebook, and they all were super helpful. That's all that is for one of these fast on tabs. Looked like some kind of weird terminal for me. Anyway, then I have a ring terminal at the base of it, and when it's turned in all the way, the rubber washers that are at the base squeeze the terminal out towards the end, and that completes the circuit for oil temperature. I finally got the right diameter hose from HPS, and this is their type, which is rated for oil, and most of the stuff that people buy is not. It's rated for air and coolant. I don't have the hose clamps on here yet because I'm not done. I started running the wires to the RDAC unit. Don't worry, this is not final installation. This is me messing around, just trying to get, I want to be able to power everything up and verify that I'm getting signal and possibly calibrate the resistance that's required. Everything in here is going to get neat and organized before I'm done here, so don't flip out just yet. So you can see I'm running some of the wires to the CAN bus. I have the oil pressure, oil temperature, fuel pressure. I'll show you that in here in a second. There is a, don't have coolant. There's a ground wire from here, and there's a 5 volts out for, I think it's the fuel pressure. Fuel pressure center unit. Recall that I ordered a fitting which is going to fit between the 6AN fitting on the hose and the throttle servo, and I have a 16 thousandths straight through orifice fitting, which reduces any gauge fluctuations, and this is a fuel pressure sender unit. And yes, it has signal, it needs 5 volts, and it has a ground. One of my little side projects was to figure out how I was going to use this linear actuator, which I had for moving this butterfly, so that it gives me, it's essentially alternate air. It'll go from the scoop, which doesn't exist yet, so that it will feed through the can-end. So a spring-loaded switch up will open the ram air inlet on the outside scoop, and down will close it and cause it to feed through the butterfly. And that's what's going on there. Just today I installed the firewall fitting with the fire sleeve, and yeah, I gotta squirt some goo in here and tighten that up. Along the way, because this has been going slow, I decided to buy a carbon cub. Unfortunately, after pricing them out, I had to scale back my aspirations and got this guy right here. Just flew it this morning. Hadn't flown an RC airplane in like 15 years. That thing's pretty cool. What else? A few days ago, I went over to Ephrata, visited my uncle, got the T-28 out. The propeller had been removed to address an AD every 5 years, complete disassembly inspection. It was already leaking around the prop hub, and the governor was leaking, so the governor's been overhauled, reinstalled, the prop's been overhauled, put back together, good for another 5 years. It needed to be test run to verify that it cycled properly, and good static check on the ground. All that went fine, so flew it for about half an hour. I only got some still pictures and about 4 seconds of video with the landing gear pins still in it. One of these days I'm gonna strap some GoPros on that thing and be able to change my intro. So I haven't had very many days working on the airplane, and even when I did get the oil tank back, I was kind of distracted by working on some of the other things like the electrical wiring. So I did the 15-pin connector. This is the buzzer that would make a lot of noise if the ELT were to trigger, say I made an amazing landing somewhere. This is the heavy-duty version of the safety trim. So this is what takes my inputs from the hat switches and the rocker switch up forward. I'll show you those in just a minute. And the heavy-duty version is required because that stab trim jack screw pulls about 7 amps. But using the safety trim allows me to run these 24 gauge wires that come out of these stick grips. So I'm able to use this part of the hat switch as my stab trim, and also the factory rocker switch. And where some people have had issues with the arcing in the factory rocker switch, now it's running so much less current. It's really just, call it signal current, instead of the whole 7 amps through this rocker switch, so I should get really good service life out of here. So these wires, I managed to tie up the bundles, get them routed in a way that kind of makes sense. Quick review if you're new, this is the MGL V16 comm radio with built-in intercom, along with monitoring of your standby frequency, the Sandia STX 165R for remote, the Echo UAT, which is my ADS-B. And so now what I've done here is I've set up one of these fuse blocks, and this is one that Eric down in Toledo pointed out to me. Pull the cover off. There's no fuses in here right now, but it has LEDs on here, so you could actually just look through the outside and see which one is blown. That's kind of a cool feature. This is just a ground block, so there's one fat wire. These are these devices right here. So the transponder comm, Echo, and what else am I missing here? Speaking of Eric down in Toledo, he let me know about this device that he invented right here. So it uses RS-232, in this case DB9 connector. And what it does is it's a trim override switch. So for example, I plan to fly this airplane mostly from the right side just because I'm weird like that. But let's say I was providing flight instruction and somebody was over here and they put down elevator or used the rocker switch for down elevator, but that was the wrong decision. If I push this one over here, it will override both of those inputs. And so it was neatly bundled in this DB9 connector, and he provided me a wiring diagram to use it. And then I didn't want to hardwire the stick switches in, so I have these set up. This takes care of those trim wires up and down, and it also is the push to talk switch. So there's some wires going both directions from here. I did this morning just power up my trim system for the first time because I wanted to make sure that the directions were correct, that when I push down that it moves the horizontal stabilizer in the correct direction. All 3 switches work perfectly. I tested Eric's override function. It also works perfectly. So I need to figure out where I'm going to stow this, but that's just part of the game. This big, it was a huge fistful of wires. I ended up using some of this split conduit, which I got actually at West Marine. It is advertised as not supporting combustion, so is it an aircraft approved? Certainly not general aviation part 23, but for experimental it's going to work just fine. And the reason it's sitting here rigidly is because I ran a piece of arrow shaft, which I have quite a bit of surplus of. I'm still have to run fuel lines, more on that later on. Get these things stowed and run. Now you can see what this airplane has looked like for quite a while. It's actually a lot worse in real life. This is still a mess, but now that I have got some practice with that tail cone, I kind of have some vision on how this is going to tighten up and look pretty nice. Getting back to this, I'm going to run another piece of this conduit to shield this piece of wire. It's going to run up to the front side of that console piece, and then it's going to split up and go where it needs to, which is of course my forest of tabs, and then that pair of fuse panels, which are going to be on a little box basically that I'm going to make right here. So when I left off last time, I was having an issue with this oil line kind of bending over this piece of the engine mount, and this main crankcase drain was actually came out at 45 degrees, which made this a lot worse. So along that way, I asked my engine importer if he could cut that 45-degree inlet fitting off and then weld it upright, and I sent it off to him, but his hanger flooded out and it ruined his welding equipment. So I had to send it back, and I found some local guy who managed to do a terrible job of welding. This is still going to be sufficient for doing my engine run-ups and hearing this thing run for the first time. And as I talked to Brett about having a brand new tank made for me with the tube upright like it shows here, he said just finish out what it is you're doing, make sure that that's exactly what you need, make any other adjustments, and then he'll get me a tank. It's not perfect the way it routes. This is a little bit high. I'm going to shorten this aluminum tube just a bit, but in general it's going to work. The crankcase, the valve cover drains come down a little bit before they come back uphill to the tank. Ideally the tank would be a little bit lower. It may push me to create new side plates like this from send cut send, drop that whole tank down a little bit. But I did finally drill holes in the firewall just yesterday. It's mounted up rigidly. Of course, these are just Clecos here, and actually I'm going to have this one on this side. So with the oil tank hooked up, I could actually put the oil in here right now. I would just fill up the tank and I'd leak check that. Fuel lines go to the firewall through fitting, but they don't do anything on this side. So one of my projects today might be to pull the airplane outside, fold the wings back so that I can get the most access to those where the fuel fittings go, and run that 6AN, and in the case of the vent 4AN hose where it needs to go to pop out here. Hopefully I don't need to chew any more wood out of that, and route that down here, and then I have to figure out what I'm doing for this. Okay, to make myself at least feel like I got something done today, I pulled it outside, unfolded the wings because it's about as clear as it gets around here. Hooked up, this is I think it's a 4AN hose. That's the vent hose. It's my banjo fitting right here for the main fuel line. Ran that one down, and then I got out the fuel gauges. I have two different kind. One is a hard plastic tube butyrate or something like that, and then these, which are Tygon, I think. And then they have this. All right, well, my camera battery died yesterday. I was filming this installation of the fuel lines. Probably won't be able to focus on that. That's the fuel vent line. I think I got an angle on that before. The fuel gauges are just these sight tubes, easy as it gets. So vent line and the 6AN from the swivel fitting inside this suede sock, and then down here. So right tank to this side, left tank goes up there, and I'll have to restrain it with some Adele clamps on the way. The vent I was hoping to make it go straight down in, but they didn't have a straight fitting, so I've ordered one from Jegs, which is the, I think it's 1/8" NPT into 4AN, book straight up. I could get away with this if I had to. Sadly, I'm out of time. I have to go back to work for a week. So when I come back, I will route the, I'm gonna try an aluminum line that runs from here forward. Exactly how it gets to the fuel selector switch to be determined, but I'll be doing that. And I was just reminded by my hangar neighbor that I've actually got quite a bit done in the last month. Got some more cleanup work to do on where some of these lines go. I'll get all that accomplished, but probably not before I run the engine, because I've had this thing pulled out twice now and people come running over, and I have to caution them it's a false alarm. Not starting it up at this time. So that's it for this episode. Come back next time. You're going to hear it run. Thanks for watching.